This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
In our last shul in Queens, in Kahal Taras MS, there was an elderly man. He was a Holocaust survivor. His name was Shmuel Lipman. He came from the city of Krakow, and he would constantly regale me with various tales in a mixture of Polish, Yiddish, English about life in Krakow, and I can't say I understood even half the words that he was saying, but many of his stories were very moving. He had a problem walking. He walked with a cane because most of his toes were amputated, and he was a short man, strong like an ox. He used to work in iron. He was a beautiful human being. And every year he would tell me about Leil Selichos in Krakow. I don't know exactly what he was saying, but he said something to the effect that in Krakow you could feel it in the air, Leil Selichos. You could touch it. You could feel it. It was like the trees were davening. You felt it. Not like tonight. And he would say the grandmothers would cook a special drink, a hot drink, for people when they would come home to be able to drink when they came home Leil Selichos. And the truth is, there's something very airy about Leil Selichos, and perhaps we could explain it with an idea that's brought down in the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer writes, and Rabbi Meir Silverberg also brings down in his Sichos Chaskos, he brings this down from the Maral, and he writes that when we daven Selichos, we're not alone. We're accompanied by generations and generations of tzaddikim, tzidkaniyos. Our ancestors come with us to say Selichos the first night of Selichos, so we don't do it by ourselves. So this is certainly an idea that's worthy of our consideration. What exactly does this mean that our ancestors come with us to say the Selichos? Why do we need them? Why dafka tonight? And the Chassam Sofer says actually throughout the Yomim Noram, the old generations come to daven together with us. What exactly is the meaning of this? One of the greatest, if not the greatest, impediment to tshuva is not realizing our own value. I was close many years ago with Rabbi Victor Miller. I had a big schus to have a shaykhus to him. And he coined a phrase which is, to me, the single greatest impediment to tshuva and to avodas Hashem. He has a famous shiur called The Perils of Humility. And he says, often, when a person is about to do an Aveira, should I look? Should I not look? Should I say it? Should I not say it? Should I daven with the minyan? Should I not daven with the minyan? So a person thinks, does Hashem really care? I mean, does Hashem care if I'm about to look and I do? Does Hashem care if I daven with the minyan? Or I'm a dakdik b'halacha? Or if I'm about to say that? Does it matter to Hashem? Not is Hashem looking. Yeah, I know He's looking. I know He knows. Does He care? Does it matter to Him? And there's a certain American attitude that could be summed up in one word. And this one word could take everything that is sacred, and everything that is holy, and everything that is important, and render everything in this world meaningless and unimportant. And this is the worst word in the American vernacular. And that is the word whatever. Whatever. It's a word that has no meaning. Actually, Rapam considered it a dirty word. Because that means you're not thinking. What do you mean whatever? Say what you want to say or don't say. What do you mean whatever? But the word whatever means that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I look, or I say, or I do, or I don't do, or I daven with the minyan. Hashem doesn't really care. And that is the most powerful Yetzer Hara. Hashem cares if I come, if davening starts 9 o'clock, if I come 9 o'clock, or 9:10, or 9:15. You think that is what is on Hashem's mind? That is the Yetzer Hara of whatever. And if a person doesn't recognize that their actions make a difference in this world, and their thoughts make a difference, and their words make a difference, then why would they do tshuva? Why would a person do tshuva? Why do I need to do tshuva? It doesn't matter anyway. You know, towards the end of Selichos, there's a tefillah which is really baffling. We say, Misha'ana la'Avraham Avinu b'har ha'Moriah hu yanenu. Misha'ana li Yitzchak kishenekar al gabe mizbeach hu yanenu. Misha'ana le'Eliyahu bahar ha-Carmel hu yanenu. Misha'ana le'Daniel begoyf ha'arayos hu yanenu. And if you think about the meaning of these words, this is such a chutzpah tefillah. It doesn't make any sense. You know what kind of chutzpah it is to say the Ribbon Shalom? You know Abraham Avinu, one of the greatest tzaddikim who ever lived? The same way you answered him, you should answer me also. A chutzpah, what a ha'azah. You're saying to the Ribbon Shalom that just like he answered Abraham Avinu, he should answer you? What do you got to do with Abraham Avinu? Abraham Avinu was one of the biggest tzaddikim who ever lived. Abraham Avinu was Makarev, the Rambam says, tens of thousands of people. Abraham Avinu was the only person in Tanakh that it says, Oy Havi, that Hashem loved him. So because Hashem answered Abraham Avinu, Hashem should answer you? What chutzpah! To say with a straight face to God, because you answered Eliyahu on Har HaKarmel, you should answer me? What comparison is there between me and Eliyahu on Har HaKarmel? Imagine if somebody would daven. Imagine over here someone davening. B'nai Shalom, you know, yesterday you answered Reb Chaim Kanievsky, so you should answer me also. Chutzpah. Ein lecha ha'azah gedolah mizu. It's ridiculous. It's a joke. To say to Hashem, like you answered Avram Avinu, you should answer me. I saw this kasha in the Selichos of Rav Asher Weiss. Sounds like a joke. You think about the meaning of the tefillah. But it's not a joke. And we say it. And the reason why we say it is because it's true. Because contrary to what the Yetzer Hara would like you to think, that maybe Hashem cares about what Avraham Avinu does, or what Eliyahu does, or what Yonah does. But Hashem is not really paying that close attention to exactly what minute I come to shul, or how many minutes a day I learn, or what I look at, or what I say, or what I think. It's not true. Because Hashem is concerned with what I do and with what you do, and what I say and what you say, and what you think and what I think, the same way He's concerned about what Abraham Avinu did, or said, or thinks. And the same way if Abraham Avinu would do a mitzvah, or say something, or think something, it would uplift the entire world, it would change the course of history. If you say something, or you think something, or you do something, it is just as powerful, and just as meaningful, and just as significant. And the same way if Avraham Avinu would do an Aveira, God would be disappointed in him. Rebbe Hashem is just as disappointed in us if we do something wrong. There's no difference between us and Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu had a neshama. It was a chelak elokam. Avraham Avinu was a son of the Rebbe Hashem. And we have a neshama. And we're a chelak elokam. And the same way if Avraham Avinu would do a small chait, it would be devastating. If we do a small chait, it's devastating. And the Rebbe Hashem cares, and it makes a big difference. And perhaps that's the meaning of the teaching of the Chassam Sofer. That the night of Selichos, we don't come alone. We don't come by ourselves. We come accompanied by generations of our ancestors, tzaddikim, the tzidkanios, because they instill in us the feeling and the belief that the same way the Rebbe Shalom was concerned with what they did and what they thought and what they said, the Rebbe Shalom is equally concerned about our maisim. And it makes a difference to Hashem. Rabbeinu Yonah was, of course, the author of the Shari Tshuva. But there's another very important sefer that Rabbeinu Yonah wrote. It's not as well known. The name of the sefer is the Shari Avodah. And Rabbeinu Yonah says, what is the first step in Avodas Hashem? What is step number one? Okay, I want to be better. I want to improve myself. What is the Pesach HaRishon? Says Rabbeinu Yonah, Ha-Pesach HaRishon hu sheyeda ha'Ish ha'Oived Erech Atzmai. The first step in Avodas Hashem is know who you are. Know your greatness. Know your value. Yakir malasai, recognize your stature. Umalas avoisav, realize how great your ancestors were. Know who your Zayda was. Know who your Elta Zayda was. Know what they meant to Hashem. You know why you need to know that? V'yaseh shelo yevoishu avoiseinu midrachav. Act in a way that your ancestors won't be embarrassed from your actions. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, v'yotzeloi mizeh. The benefit is as follows. Ki kasher yisav tava. If a person has a desire, a passion to do an Aveira, to look at something, to say something, to do something, Yala bilvavai, think the following. Eich yaseh hara hagadoila hazu. How could I do this? V'yevosh me'avoseinu. It would be embarrassing to my forefathers. It would be embarrassing, says Rabbi Yonah, to myself. Adam gadol v'chashuv kamoini. A great, important person like me. Eich eseh hara hazois. If a person is about to do an Aveira, the first safety net is if the President of the United States would do this. You know what kind of commotion and ruckus and destruction it could cause? You know how many people are watching? You know how important every act that he does is? If a person says about himself, you know what? It doesn't matter. There's no difference between 9 o'clock and 9:10. Who cares? If a person says, if I learn 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day, who cares? If a person doesn't realize that every extra maisa that he does makes the vast difference in the universe, then we're not at step 1 yet. Step 1 is to recognize your value to the Rebbeinu Shem. That Hashem is looking at you because He cares about you, and He values you, and He thinks you're important, and He feels that everything you do makes a big difference. Yosef HaTzadik was challenged with Eshes Potiphera. So he's about to do the Maisa. The Gemara says he was about to do the Maisa. So what stopped him? Was it he was afraid he was going to go to Gehenna? No. Was it that he was afraid he was going to get caught? Chazal say, Niras Eloi demus diyuknoi shel Aviv. He saw his father and he realized, you know who I am? I'm Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. That was what stopped one of the greatest tzaddikim of all time from ruining his life. Recognizing his greatness, recognizing that what he does makes a difference in this world. The Gemara in Gittin on Unches talks about the son and the daughter of Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol. They were taken captive. They were exquisitely beautiful and handsome, respectively. And the captors put them in one room. They locked them up in the room. And they had a plan. The plan would be that the children produced from this union would command a hefty price on the slave market, and they would split the earnings. They didn't know they were brother and sister. The brother and sister did not see each other. And they're sitting there in the room, and they're faced with this challenge. And they overcame the challenge. Why? How? Because they were afraid they would be punished? That's not what it says. Because they were afraid they would be caught? Says the Gemara, the son said, Ani kohen ben kohanim gedolim. How could I do this? I'm such a great person. My father, my grandfather were kohanim gedolim. How could I do this to them? That was the safety net. It wasn't Yiras Shamayim, it wasn't Yiras Chet. It was, I can't let myself down. I can't let my parents down. I can't let my ancestors down. And maybe that's the reason, and that's the meaning of the Chassam Sofer. That Leil Selichos, as we embark on the road of Tshuva, we don't do it on our own. But we're accompanied by tzaddikim, tzidkanios, our ancestors. They're coming together with us so that we realize that the number one thing that will motivate us and propel us to do tshuva is to try to live up to the greatness of Masai Yagiu Masai Lamaisai Avaseinu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov. And I believe that one of the messages of the tefillah, Misha Ana LaAvraham Avinu Hu Yanenu, Misha Ana LiYitzchak Hu Yanenu, the purpose of this tefillah is to knock into our minds that the same way we understand a Gadol Hadar, yeah, everything he does is so important. Every word he says is scrutinized. Every thought is important to Rebbeinu Shalom. Well, every yid is chaviv v'nechma to Rebbeinu Shalom, where every maisa and every dibur and every machshava is valued by Hashem. And Hashem's looking at it. Hashem is probing it because it makes a difference in this world. Because life is not a joke. Because what you do matters. And what you say matters. And what you think matters. Now Rizal writes that as important as any maisa is, in our generation, in the later generations, every maisa is compounded and magnified much, much greater than earlier generations. The Arizal, it's written in the Sefer Shar HaGagulim, Daf Samach Beis Amud Beis. The Arizal says that in our generation, every Maisa is infinitely more important than any other generation. So the question is, why would that be? Here we are, we're Yasmi to Yasmi, we're on such a low level compared to earlier generations. Why would our Maisim be more important to Rebbeinu than earlier generations? Rabbi Vadia gives a mashal. Says there was once a princess, and this princess was very dear to the king, and the king would do anything for her, and the king would fulfill her any desire. And everybody knew if you wanted to get the princess to intercede on your behalf, you would have to give the princess something really big. Because what could you possibly give a princess? The princess already has everything. And it was very difficult to bribe the princess. She's already in the king's palace. There's barely anything you could give her. And it happened. Somebody spread a rumor about the princess, probably on a WhatsApp or something like that. And her reputation was ruined. And she was actually incarcerated. And she was put in jail until her name was cleared. And in jail, she didn't even have basic necessities. She didn't have proper food. She didn't have proper clothing. And there was one man who came to the princess and would bring her something good to eat, some decent clothing. And as meager as this gift was, but to the princess, this had much greater value than any gift and any present that anybody brought her when she was in the palace. Because now is when she really needed it. When she gets out of the jail, and she's sitting back on the throne again, in full grandeur, wearing the crown of royalty, who do you think this princess remembers more than anybody else? It's not the guys, it's not the people who brought her those magnificent gifts in the palace. The princess remembers that one person who brought her a little bit to eat and some clothing to wear when she was in her misery. Says Rabbi Vadia, it's the same thing with us. Bizman shebeis hamikdash hayakayam, for a person to do a maisa that would impress the Rebbeinu Shalom, that would be meaningful to Rebbeinu Shalom, boy, did you have to do a mitzvah with such mesiras nefesh to bring kavod to Hashem. After all, you're living in a generation, it's yakiru v'yedu kol yesh le'seilo. What could you do already to be mar b'kvod shamayim when the Beis HaMikdash stood? But in our generation, it's Shechina b'galusa. The Rebbeinu Shalom is in such pain. The Shechina is in such a dark galus, in a society which is decadent, hedonistic, where every value of society is antithetical to the Torah. The Shechina is in such pain that even if a person does the smallest maisa, the smallest chesed, the smallest extra learning, the smallest extra tefillah, it's so chaviv in the eyes of Rebbeinu Shalom, it's much greater than maisim of tzaddikim of earlier generations. Many years ago, the greatest conductor, probably in history, was the Italian maestro Arturo Toscanini. Arturo Toscanini passed away in 1957. At the age of 89, he was a very intense personality. He was a perfectionist. His ear was razor sharp. And to top it off, he had, besides a terrible temper, he had a perfect ear for music. And he had a photographic memory. And there was a biographer who was writing a very authoritative biography on Arturo Toscanini. And he was in the middle of writing the book, and one afternoon he calls up Toscanini. He says, "Would you mind if I came over tomorrow evening? We could finish up the book." And Toscanini says, "You could come any other night. You can't come tomorrow night." Well, why? What's tomorrow night? He said, "Look, tomorrow night there is a symphony that's going to be playing in London, and I plan on listening to it on shortwave radio, and I can't have any disturbance. I need to listen very carefully. Nobody could be in the room. Nobody can make a peep. I can't be distracted." So the biographer said, "Look, it would be a great honor for me to sit in the room and watch you listen to the orchestra. So I'll make a deal with you. I'll come, I'll watch, but I won't make a peep. I won't move, I won't breathe. I'll be like a fixture, I'll be like a piece of furniture. Just let me come into the room." So reluctantly, Toscanini lets him into the room. He says, "Make sure you're here 7:45 sharp." Comes 7:45, Symphony is called for 8 o'clock. Toscanini does not move for an hour. He's glued to the shortwave radio with all the static and all the commotion. Most people will not even be able to hear anything. Toscanini is listening to every note, and at 9 o'clock, Toscanini takes the radio and slams it down in utter disgust. And the biographer said, sounded beautiful. Toscanini said, beautiful? There were supposed to be 120 musicians. Only 119 showed up. There should have been 15 violinists, not 14. And the guy's looking at him like, this guy might be the greatest conductor in the world. I never met such an arrogant man. How in the world could he know that only 14 violinists showed up? You could barely hear a thing over shortwave radio. There's so much static. 14 violinists. But he didn't dare say a word to him because the guy had a temper. He could have killed him. He decided he's going to check for himself. So the next morning he calls London. He calls the music director. And he says, by the way, how many musicians were supposed to have come? How many showed up? He said, look, we're supposed to have 120. Only 119 showed up. One of the violinists canceled the last second. He's floored. How in the world did Toscanini know over shortwave radio that one of the violinists did not show up? So he goes back to the maestro. He says, I have to ask your apology. When you told me only 14 violinists showed up, I didn't believe you. I'm just floored. How could you know something like that? So Toscanini looks him in the eye. He says, listen to me. That's the difference between me and you. You're just a regular listener. But I'm the conductor. And I'm listening to every note and to every harmony. And if I realized that there was one note that was missing, that means somebody did not show up. Somebody did not play. And that's how I realized there was a musician missing from the symphony. Well, moreover, Rabbi say, the Ribbon Shalom is the great conductor of the universe. And as he's watching from Shamayim, he is attuned to every note and every beat and every harmony. And that means he's listening to every word we say, and he's probing every thought, and he's looking at every action. And it makes a difference to Hashem, because it makes a difference to the conductor, because you can't have a note missing. And each one of us plays a very important role in the orchestra of Hashem. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made us. And that means every day of our life and every moment of life has a beat and has a note and has a tune, and the conductor is watching very carefully. And that means that our lives matter to Hashem, and our actions matter to Hashem, and our words matter, and our thoughts matter. And we are no less important than Avraham Avinu. And therefore we're allowed to say the tefillah, Misha'ana la'Avraham Avinu, Hu Yanenu. May the Rebbe Shem answer all of our tefillahs, Barachim and Barakah.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.